Under the relentless African sun, an albino baby elephant collapsed without a sound. His skin was burning, his breathing shallow, and the herd had already moved on. In the wild, moments like this usually mark the end. But that day, instead of leaving the weakest behind, the herd made a choice no one expected, a choice that would change not only the calf's fate, but everything we believe about strength, family, and survival. If stories about nature, compassion, and quiet moments of courage still matter to you, consider subscribing to this channel so you don't miss the ones that remind us why they do. Morning in the Okavango Delta arrived quietly, as if the world hadn't decided whether to burn or bloom. A thin mist hovered over the channels, and the papyrus stood still in the pale light. Ethan Carter checked his batteries by feel, the way he always did, before he let himself enjoy the calm. He wasn't here on assignment, not for a network, not for a glossy magazine spread. He was a one-man crew with a folding field table, 2 hard drives, and a drone that had survived more sandstorms than it should have. Out here, the only schedule was the sun, and it always kept its promises. By late morning, the air hardened. The breeze died, and the sky turned into a white lid pressed down on the grasslands. Ethan wiped his lens, then his forehead, then gave up on both. He walked with measured steps, careful not to crack twigs or kick stones that might carry sound. A herd moved ahead of them, dark shapes drifting through heat, shimmer like ships on a bright sea. Ethan counted fast: adults, juveniles, calves tucked between legs the size of barrels. The rhythm was familiar, almost soothing. He lifted his binoculars anyway, because habit was how he stayed alive. Rosa Nguyen stayed a few paces behind, scanning the ground like it could suddenly tell a secret. She wasn't a ranger, and didn't pretend to be. Field medic, wildlife rescue support. The kind of person who carried electrolytes and burn gel in a pouch beside her canteen. She watched animals with the same focus she watched people. Ethan launched the drone from a patch of bare earth, the propellers slicing a brief, sharp hum into the silence. On the monitor, the elephants became a moving pattern across the savanna. Then the pattern broke. A small shape trailed far behind, wobbling in a way that didn't match the herd's steady pull forward. At first, he thought it was just a tired calf. Then the camera stabilized, and his throat tightened. The lagging calf wasn't gray. It was pale, pink-white, almost luminous in the glare, like someone had dropped a piece of dawn onto the ground and left it there. Its eyes, even from the aerial view, looked too light to be real. Rosa stepped closer to the screen, and Ethan heard the change in her breathing. "That's Albino," she said, not as a guess, but as a verdict. She didn't raise her voice, yet the words felt loud. Ethan's fingers hovered over the controls, suddenly afraid that any movement might jinx what he was seeing. The calf stumbled, tried to jog, then stopped again. Its chest worked too fast, too shallow. Heat rippled off its back like smoke. In the drone feed, the herd continued forward, the distance widening by the second. The calf's shadow was short and brutal under the noon sun, offering almost no mercy. Rosa reached for her radio, instinct and training pulling her toward action. "We can call a unit," she murmured. "Cooling fluids, shade tarp, something." Ethan didn't answer right away. He'd filmed enough wild elephants to know how quickly a rescue could turn into a stampede, how easily help could become the reason a calf was left behind. The calf dropped to its knees as if the ground had yanked it down. For a second it stayed upright, swaying, then folded sideways into the grass. Ethan's stomach went hollow. Rosa's hand tightened around the radio like it was the last thread holding the world together. "If it goes down like that again," she said, "it may not come back up." Ethan lowered the drone a little, zooming tighter, searching for any sign of movement in the herd. The adults were still walking. The gap was now obscene, a whole life's worth of space. The calf's ears twitched once, then went still. Ethan swallowed hard, thinking of every documentary voiceover that had ever called this nature's way. A dry click sounded behind them, metal against metal, So faint it could have been a branch, or a mistake. Ethan turned his head just enough to see a man at the edge of the reeds, crouched low, watching the same direction. The man lifted 2 fingers to his lips in a silent warning, then pointed to the distant track line. Human footprints, fresh, cutting toward the herd. Ethan faced forward again, pulse loud in his ears, and kept his hand steady on the controller. The calf lay motionless, a pale mark on scorched earth, while the herd moved like a dark tide that refused to look back. For a heartbeat, the world felt cruel and simple. Then, on the monitor, the largest silhouette in the herd slowed, just slightly, like time had snagged on something unseen. The herd didn't stop, not yet. It moved on with the same deliberate rhythm, heavy feet pressing paths into dust and grass as if nothing behind them mattered. From Ethan's screen, the distance looked unforgiving. He reminded himself that elephants were not sentimental creatures. Survival had rules, and weakness usually paid the price. Ethan adjusted the drone's altitude, forcing his hands to stay steady. The image sharpened, revealing the calf's skin blistered with heat, pale and unprotected beneath a brutal sun. Albinism wasn't rare because it was hidden. It was rare because it didn't last. Out here, difference had consequences no one negotiated. Rosa didn't look at him when she spoke again. "Most don't make it past 2, she said quietly. "Sun damage, infections, predators. Even if the herd wanted to help, there's only so much they can do." Her words weren't cruel. They were practiced, shaped by years of watching reality ignore hope. The calf tried to rise, legs trembling like they belonged to another body. It managed half a step before collapsing again, a dull thud swallowed by grass. Ethan felt his chest tighten. He had filmed animals die before. Usually it happened fast. This felt slower, stretched thin, like something being erased frame by frame. He thought about the stories editors loved, nature's balance, ruthless efficiency, the clean poetry of loss. None of that fit what he was seeing. This wasn't elegant or instructive. It was messy, uncomfortable, and too intimate to feel like a lesson. It felt like a mistake that no one was allowed to fix. Behind them, the man in the reeds shifted his weight. Caleb Brooks didn't come closer. He didn't need to. His presence alone changed the math. Poachers followed rarity, the way storms followed heat. An albino calf was not just fragile. It was valuable, and value made everything worse. Rosa lowered her radio, but didn't put it away. "If we wait," she said, "and it dies, we did nothing. If we act, and the herd panics, we could cause the same outcome." She finally looked at Ethan. There was no accusation in her eyes, only the quiet pressure of shared responsibility. Ethan glanced back at the monitor. The herd was still moving, but something felt off. The formation had stretched, then tightened again, like breath being held. One of the larger females slowed, her head turning slightly, ears angling back. It was subtle enough to miss if you weren't already searching for mercy. The calf lifted its head. Its eyes, pale and unfocused, scanned the empty space ahead as if expecting something to return. Ethan leaned closer to the screen, heart climbing into his throat. He'd seen this moment before. The pause, right before giving up. He'd never seen it followed by anything else. The sun pressed harder, flattening color and sound. Insects vanished into silence. Even the wind seemed to step back. Ethan realized he was holding his breath, waiting for a decision that wasn't his to make. He told himself this was observation, not abandonment. The distinction felt thin. Then one shadow detached from the herd. Just one. It slowed, then stopped entirely. The others moved on for several steps before halting, as if surprised by their own momentum. Ethan's screen filled with stillness. The largest silhouette turned, massive and deliberate, facing the space they had left behind. Rosa whispered something Ethan didn't catch. Caleb straightened slightly, tension rippling through his shoulders. The calf shifted again, weak but aware. Dust clung to its side. For the first time since the morning, Ethan felt something loosen inside him. Not hope exactly, but the absence of certainty. The matriarch took a single step back. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't rushed. It was simply undeniable. Ethan knew then that whatever happened next would not fit the story he'd expected to tell. The rules were about to change, and none of them were ready for how far that change might go. The matriarch didn't hurry. She moved with the calm authority of something older than fear, her shoulders rolling like slow waves under thick skin. In Ethan's drone feed, the rest of the herd froze where they stood, as if they'd been anchored to the earth. The heat shimmer kept dancing, but the elephants held perfectly still. Ethan nudged the drone higher for context, then eased it down again for detail. The matriarch's ears angled outward, not flared in threat, more like a signal. A second adult female pivoted, then another. It happened without noise, without drama, just a quiet agreement spreading through bodies that had traveled together for decades. On the ground, the albino calf lay where it had fallen, a pale spill of life against scorched grass. Its trunk twitched once, then curled weakly toward its chest. Ethan's mouth went dry. He'd filmed rescues before, human rescues, loud and frantic. This was different. This was the world deciding, in silence, that it wasn't finished. Rosa crouched beside Ethan's monitor, careful to keep her silhouette low. "They're coming back," she breathed, as if saying it too loudly might break it. Her hand hovered over her radio again, then lowered, trembling. Ethan watched her struggle to stay still, the way a medic fights every instinct when the patient isn't theirs to touch. Caleb stayed a few yards behind them, eyes sweeping the reeds and the distant track line. He lifted his binoculars toward the horizon, then lowered them, jaw set. Whatever he saw, he didn't like it. Ethan felt the pull of two dangers at once, the calf dying in the sun, and the wrong humans closing in if word spread. The matriarch reached the calf and stopped with her front feet planted wide, creating a patch of shade that looked almost tender. She lowered her head, trunk extending in a slow arc. The tip of it touched the calf's back, one gentle press, then another, like a steady hand reminding someone to breathe. Ethan's chest tightened with something he couldn't name. The calf tried to rise. It failed, slipping back into the grass. Instead of stepping away, the matriarch shifted her body so her shadow covered the calf's face. Another adult moved in on the opposite side, forming a narrow corridor of shade. The air around them seemed to cool, not from weather, but from intention. Ethan's drone camera caught a detail that made his pulse spike. The herd wasn't just returning, they were reforming. The adults arranged themselves in a loose arc, backs to the open plain, faces turned outward. It looked less like comfort and more like strategy. A living wall that turned the calf from left behind into protected. Rosa pressed her palm to the ground, grounding herself. "This isn't normal," she whispered, voice thick. "Most herds keep moving. They don't reorganize." Ethan didn't answer. He couldn't. His eyes stayed locked on the screen as if blinking might undo the scene and replace it with the version nature usually chose. The matriarch made a low movement with her trunk, almost a nudge beneath the calf's shoulder. The second female mirrored her on the other side. Together, they created a cradle without lifting, support without force. The calf's legs trembled, then found purchase. It stood, swaying, held in place by the presence of two giants. Ethan felt his hands shake on the controller. He adjusted exposure, then steadied his breathing, then adjusted again. Every instinct in him screamed to capture this perfectly, to make it undeniable, to prove later that he hadn't imagined it. But another part of him, the part that loved wild things, wanted to look away and let the moment belong to them. Caleb's voice finally cut through the hush, low and sharp. "We don't stay here long," he murmured, eyes still on the reed line. "If someone's tracking, they'll see the drone." Ethan swallowed. The threat didn't erase the miracle. It sharpened it. It meant the herd's choice might cost them more than time. The matriarch began to walk, slow enough to be almost patient, and the calf stepped between the two females like it had been invited back into the world. The herd matched the pace, without hesitation. Ethan watched the formation tighten, the calf drifting toward the center, as if pulled by gravity that only elephants understood. For the first time, the story stopped feeling like an ending. and started feeling like a vow. The herd moved again, but not forward in the way Ethan expected. Their pace slowed until it felt deliberate, almost ceremonial. Each step was measured to the calf's uneven rhythm, the adults adjusting without any visible signal. Ethan tracked them from above, realizing this wasn't hesitation. It was a decision unfolding in real time. Rosa rose slightly from her crouch, eyes fixed on the screen. "They can't keep this up in the open," she said. "Not in this heat." Her voice carried the weight of experience, burns, dehydration, shock. She knew how quickly a fragile body could tip past recovery. Waiting, she feared, could still be fatal. Ethan felt the familiar pull of responsibility tighten around his ribs. He wasn't a vet. He wasn't a ranger. But he had a radio, coordinates, and a clear view of a life slipping between margins. Filmmakers weren't supposed to intervene, yet the line between witness and accomplice felt thinner than ever. Behind them, Caleb shifted again, scanning the horizon with practiced impatience. "You call this in," he said quietly, "and it won't just be rangers who hear about it." He knelt, brushing 2 fingers over the dirt. "Tracks are fresh. Someone's been cutting across the Jas Delta since dawn." The word "someone" landed hard. Ethan knew what that meant. People who followed rarity, who measured value in tusks and skin. An albino calf wasn't just vulnerable. It was a beacon. Help could arrive wearing the wrong faces, and once that happened, there was no undoing it. Rosa closed her eyes for a moment, breathing through the conflict. "If it collapses again, we may not get another chance," she said. "I didn't come out here to watch something die when I could have helped." Her hand hovered over the radio, thumb poised like a loaded question. On the monitor, the calf stumbled, corrected, then stumbled again. The matriarch halted instantly, her body forming shade before the calf even touched the ground. Another adult stepped in behind, blocking the sun from a different angle. The response was so fast it felt rehearsed. Ethan leaned closer, heart pounding. The herd wasn't improvising anymore. They were adapting, rewriting their own rules to keep one body alive. He'd filmed intelligence before, even empathy. This was something else. This was commitment, expressed without sound or spectacle. Caleb lowered his binoculars. "They're buying time," he said, "but time's expensive out here." He glanced at the drone, then back to Ethan. "Every minute you stay airborne, you risk drawing eyes we don't want." The miracle carried its own danger, and it was growing. Rosa exhaled slowly and let her radio drop against her chest. "Okay," she said, the word heavy but resolved. "We wait." It wasn't surrender. It was trust, fragile, conditional, and terrifying. Ethan met her eyes and nodded, unsure if he was agreeing or simply hoping. The calf lifted its head again, blinking against the glare. Mud clung to its knees from an earlier fall, drying too fast. The matriarch brushed it away with her trunk, gentle and precise. The gesture wasn't hurried. It was intimate, like reassurance passed from skin to skin. Ethan eased. The drone higher, widening the frame to capture the whole formation. From above, the herd no longer looked like a group in motion. They looked like a shelter, an idea made of muscle and memory. He realized this choice, whatever it cost, would change all of them. As the sun edged lower, the heat softened just enough to breathe. The herd held its ground, the calf still standing, still included. Ethan felt the tension in his chest loosen a fraction. The crisis wasn't over, but the question had shifted. It was no longer whether humans should step in, but whether they could do better than what was already happening. The first sign came quietly. One of the adult females broke formation and angled toward the edge of the marsh, moving with purpose rather than panic. Ethan followed her with the drone, confused, until the camera revealed a dark ribbon of wet earth where water seeped up from below the grass. She scooped mud with her trunk and turned back, careful not to spill it. Another elephant followed, then another, each collecting the same thick, mineral-heavy clay. Ethan felt a chill despite the heat. He'd seen mud baths before, but never like this. This wasn't play. This was preparation. The matriarch lowered her head as the first elephant reached the calf. The mud was pressed gently onto the pale skin, spread with deliberate strokes. It clung like armor, dulling the glare of the sun. The calf flinched once, then stilled, as if it understood the touch meant relief. Rosa sucked in a sharp breath. "They're insulating it," she whispered. "Cooling, blocking UV, slowing fluid loss." She sounded stunned, like a student watching a lesson she didn't know existed. Ethan zoomed tighter, capturing every careful motion, afraid the world might doubt him later. More elephants joined, taking turns without crowding. One applied mud. Another used her ears to fan air, slow and rhythmic. The heat shimmer faded around the calf's body, replaced by shade and movement. The calf's breathing eased, just slightly, but enough to be unmistakable. Ethan's hands trembled as he adjusted focus. This wasn't instinct alone. It was coordination, a shared solution assembled without debate or delay. He realized he was witnessing knowledge passed not through words, but through memory and necessity, refined by generations that had survived worse suns. Caleb shifted uneasily behind them. "This keeps it alive," he said, "but it keeps us here longer." He glanced toward the horizon, where the land flattened into dangerous visibility. "Longer we stay, the higher the odds someone else notices." The miracle had a ticking clock. The calf tried to stand again, legs wobbling under the new weight of mud. The matriarch moved closer, her shoulder a steady wall. The calf leaned into her, found balance, and stayed upright. Ethan felt his throat burn. This wasn't rescue. It was belonging. Rosa lowered herself onto her heels. Radio forgotten. "If we step in now," she said softly, "we break this." Her eyes never left the screen. They're not just keeping it alive. They're teaching it how to survive. The realization landed heavier than any plan she'd carried. The herd began to shift, slowly tightening their circle. The calf stood at the center, no longer exposed, no longer alone. Ethan widened the frame, capturing the geometry of protection. From above, it looked intentional, almost architectural, a living design shaped by care. The sun drifted west, its edge losing some cruelty. The calf's head lifted higher, eyes clearer beneath the drying mud. It took a tentative step, then another. The herd matched it without complaint. No rush, no frustration, just patience stretched across massive bodies. Ethan lowered the drone slightly, heart pounding with something dangerously close to hope. The worst moment had passed, but nothing was guaranteed. Still, as the herd moved as one, and the calf moved with them, he understood this was no longer about survival alone. Something fundamental had already changed. The decision to move came without warning. The matriarch turned her body toward the distant tree line, where darker green promised shade and deeper water. Ethan felt it before he fully understood it. Staying had bought time. Moving would decide everything. Rosa stood slowly, scanning the horizon. "That's at least 3 miles," she said. "In this heat." Her voice trailed off. She didn't need to finish the thought. The calf had barely regained its strength, and the sun still owned most of the sky. The herd reorganized itself in a way Ethan had never seen. The calf was guided inward, surrounded on all sides by adults whose massive bodies formed a moving barrier. 2 elephants flanked it closely, matching every uneven step, while others took wider positions, shielding from wind and glare. Ethan sent the drone higher, tracing the pattern from above. It wasn't random. It was a Yowai shape, tight, deliberate, protective. The herd no longer moved like travelers. They moved like guardians escorting something precious through hostile ground. The calf faltered after only a few minutes. Instantly, the entire formation stopped. No impatience, no nudging. Mud was reapplied, ears fanned. Shade was rebuilt where none existed. Ethan watched the pause stretch, realizing how much ground they were willing to lose for one life. Caleb checked his watch, then the horizon. "This trip should take 2 hours," he muttered. "At this pace, it'll be triple that." He didn't sound critical. He sounded impressed and worried. Slowness out here was a risk all its own. They started again, step by step, The calf leaned into the bodies beside it, learning their rhythm. When it slipped, a shoulder appeared. When it hesitated, the matriarch slowed the world. Ethan felt the tension climb with every minute that passed. Halfway across the open plain, the heat surged again. The calf sagged, knees dipping dangerously close to collapse. Rosa sucked in air, hand flying to her mouth. Ethan's heart slammed. If it went down here, there would be no shade, no mercy. The herd closed ranks even tighter. Adults pressed inward, creating a pocket of shadow so dense it looked almost solid from above. Mud darkened and cracked on the calf's skin, still holding. After a long, frightening pause, the calf straightened again. Ethan realized his hands were numb. He'd stopped thinking in scenes and shots and started counting breaths instead. This was no longer something he was filming. It was something he was surviving alongside them, helpless but present. When the first trees finally came into view, the herd didn't speed up. They kept the same careful pace, refusing to trade safety for relief. Ethan felt something break open in his chest, an understanding that strength didn't always look like endurance. Sometimes it looked like restraint. As they reached the edge of shade, the calf took several steady steps on its own. Not fast, not confident, but upright. Ethan lowered the drone slightly, letting the moment breathe. The journey wasn't over, but against all expectation, it was still unfolding. The trees brought relief, but not peace. Shade softened the light and cooled the air, yet Ethan felt a new tension settle in his gut. Survival had shifted the rules again. The calf was standing, yes, but now they were stationary, gathered, visible. In places like this, stillness could be dangerous. Caleb was the first to sense it. He stiffened, one hand lifting in a silent stop. His eyes tracked the far edge of the clearing where the grass bent unnaturally, not with wind, but with intent. Ethan followed his gaze through the drone feed, heart slowing, then pounding harder. "There," Caleb murmured. "Someone's glassing us." He didn't say who. He didn't need to. The word carried weight. Hunters, opportunists, people who measured wonder in profit. And our albino calf wasn't just rare. It was irresistible to the wrong kind of attention. Rosa's relief evaporated. "If they scatter now..." She didn't finish. The sentence ended where the calf's chances did. Her instincts screamed to act, to call it in, to bring protection that wore uniforms. But uniforms also brought noise, tracks, and news that traveled too far. On the monitor, the matriarch lifted her head. Her ears widened, not in alarm, but in awareness. The herd reacted instantly. Adults moved inward, calves pressed close, and the albino calf was drawn tight to the center, like a secret worth guarding. Ethan had seen defensive circles before. This was different. The elephants didn't face outward in panic. They stood firm, shoulder to shoulder, a wall of muscle and tusk that advanced a single step at a time, not fleeing, warning. The calf disappeared from view, swallowed by gray bodies. For a terrifying second, Ethan thought it had fallen. Then the drone angle shifted, revealing the calf upright, hidden, breathing steadily. Protected so completely, it was almost invisible. Caleb lowered his binoculars slowly. "They're telling whoever's out there, this isn't worth it," he said. His voice carried awe, not bravado. And they're right. From the far grass, the disturbance stilled. Whatever eyes had been watching chose distance over risk. The herd held formation long after the threat faded. No rush, no celebration, just vigilance stretched thin, then eased. Ethan felt his shoulders drop for the first time in hours. The danger hadn't passed because humans intervened. It had passed because the herd refused to break. Rosa wiped her face with the back of her hand. "They didn't just protect it," she said quietly. "They claimed it." The words landed heavy and true. This wasn't a temporary mercy. It was a line drawn around one life. The matriarch shifted, signaling a gradual release of tension. The circle loosened. Calves peeked out. The albino calf stepped forward, mud cracked but steady, eyes brighter than before. It wasn't just alive. It was included. Ethan adjusted the drone for a wider shot, framing the herd as they stood beneath the trees. Calm again, ordinary in appearance, extraordinary in choice. He knew then the story had crossed a point of no return. The weakest member had changed the shape of the strong. As the afternoon light angled lower, the herd resumed its quiet routines. Ethan let the camera run, but his mind was elsewhere. Whatever came next, dry season, distance, danger, this moment had already rewritten the ending he thought he understood. The morning broke cooler, washed clean by a thin night breeze that left dew clinging to the grass. Ethan woke before the light fully arrived, listening to the low, distant rumbles that carried through the trees. The herd was still there. The sound alone felt like an answer he hadn't dared ask. He launched the drone gently, keeping it high, respectful. Below, the elephants moved with an ease that hadn't existed days earlier. The formation wasn't tight now. It didn't need to be. The albino calf walked near the center, unhurried, its steps steadier, its posture more certain. Rosa watched in silence, arms crossed against the morning chill. "It's learning," she said at last. The calf paused beneath a tree, reached its trunk into damp soil, and smeared mud along its own flank. Not perfectly, not fully, but deliberately. Ethan felt a quiet swell behind his eyes. Caleb checked his map and shook his head, half smiling. "They won't stay here," he said. "They never do." He marked a wide area, not a point. A decision without coordinates, protection without exposure. Ethan understood the compromise and felt relief settle where fear had lived. The matriarch led the herd toward a ribbon of water deeper in the delta. No urgency, no ceremony, just forward motion shaped by patience. The calf lagged once, then corrected itself, slipping between two adults who made room without breaking stride. Ethan framed a wide shot, letting the landscape breathe. Gray bodies against green, light pooling at their feet. The pale calf no longer glowed like a warning. It belonged to the pattern now, a difference absorbed rather than erased. The image felt complete without needing emphasis. Rosa lowered her radio and clipped it shut. "We monitor," she said, from far away. It wasn't defeat, it was restraint. Ethan nodded, feeling the weight of that choice settle into something like peace. Intervention, he realized, wasn't always the bravest act. A soft exchange rippled through the herd, touches, low sounds, routine restored. The calf brushed trunks with another young elephant, a brief, playful contact that made Rosa laugh once, quietly. The sound felt earned, a release after days of holding breath. Ethan thought about the stories people expected. Rescue teams, vehicles, heroes in frame. He thought about how none of that would fit this ending. The power here was quieter, harder to package, and truer for it. He kept filming anyway. The sun climbed, gentler than before. The herd moved on, carrying their choice with them. Ethan let the drone rise, then powered it down, committing the final image to memory as much as to storage. Some moments didn't ask to be chased. As they packed, Ethan glanced back one last time. The albino calf turned its head, eyes clear, and continued walking. No pause, no plea. Just motion, shared and protected. The world hadn't saved it. The herd had changed the world it lived in. Later, on the drive out, Ethan began his notes with a sentence he hadn't planned. Not about rarity, not about odds. He wrote about strength that slows down, about care that reshapes direction, about how everything changed, not because time ran out, but because it didn't. Sometimes the strongest choice isn't to step in, but to step back and let something wiser unfold. If this story moved you, leave a simple 1 in the comments to say you felt it too. And if you believe stories like this still matter, consider subscribing so we can keep sharing the moments that quietly change how we see the world.